Okay, we are down to, maybe we will.
It forwarded. It was a little slow, but it forwarded.
Okay. Now I need to go back. Okay, we'll begin there. Just wanted to share, some of you get, I know Kathleen gets the Voice of the Martyrs, but sometimes we forget the things that are going on around the world. And we're talking about Revelation, and one of the things mentioned there earlier, we talked about this, was those who are coming out. It's present tense. Those who are coming out or continuing to come out of this intense suffering or intense persecution. That's been going on since the church started. I would submit to you that it's even been more intensified in the last 100 years. If you look at the statistics, there's more people dying as martyrs for Christ in the last 100, 150 years than all the time before that. But one of the things we just sometimes, and I know I don't either until I get a hold of reading some of this, but this one account of this young man in Ethiopia who grew up as a Muslim, and he came to faith. He writes about the fact that in 2017, a bunch of rioting Muslims beat, sexually assaulted, and killed Christians, destroyed more than 2,000 homes and more than a dozen churches, trying their best to drive the Christians clear out of the region. These are things that are going on now. That relates to what we've been talking about in Revelation. And this young man came to Christ, and of course that created all kinds of problems with his family. He had a goal of trying to reach at least one Muslim family in this region. So God led him to this man who had tried to commit suicide, and said that he was being besieged by these evil spirits. And this man, he was able to lead this man to Christ. And then as a result, other families came to accept. And this whole village area then was attacked in 2016 by a group of Muslim rioters. He eventually had to leave the city, at least for a while, with his family. These are things that are going on now, in present tense time. And that's what John is trying to say to the church. Look, beware. These are things that we're going to be involved in this conflict. We don't know what's coming here in our own land yet. We're seeing all kinds of changes, though, aren't we? We're seeing all kinds of pressure put on you if you are a person of faith, if you dare to hold to certain moral values. These are struggles that we're beginning to see take place here. So this is not something that's far removed. It's not something that's way off in the distant future. It's stuff that's happening right now. So we want to see how this applies. Notice that we finished chapter 16. We talked about the final angel coming, and you see this thing being wrapped up again. So what have we been saying throughout the letter? There's a series of repetitions. John is doing this different ways. That was a very common thing to do. How many people do you think were literate back in John's day? Could actually read? Estimates that I've found were somewhere around 25% or so at best of people who are literate. So what's the way you're going to get information and learn? Verbally, by hearing. That was one of the things said at the beginning of this letter. Those who hear this word. So when you're listening to something and hearing something, having it repeated in a graphic, symbolic way kind of enhances your memory, doesn't it? And it helps you remember. That's one of the tools of this type of literature, was to repeat things in a different way. And that's what John's been doing through this letter. It's not meant to be read chronologically. We want to get the picture. We want to get the message. And so remember again, at the beginning of the letter, Jesus is speaking to the churches, right? 7 of them would indicate to me completeness. In other words, it's a message to the church for all time. And some of those different aspects are in there. So here we go to 17 and 18. We're going to see in 17 and 18 the destruction of Babylon. Now, when we're talking about Babylon, who are we talking about in John's day? Rome. We're talking about Rome. Let's just read through the first section of verses here, and then we'll go back and review this. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came to me and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters." Now, at this point, we're going to kind of be beginning to assemble some information, but at the end of the chapter, it's going to be extremely clear who he's talking about. All right? And so the comparison is to what image here? A prostitute. Okay? Kind of graphic picture. With her, the kings of the earth committed what? And we're talking in an image way what? About what kind of adultery? Spiritual. We're talking about spiritual adultery. And the earth dwellers, the inhabitants of the earth, that's people who are what? Their tie is here, earthwise. They're not thinking of eternal things. All right? They were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. It was all the stuff that she could do out there to allure them, to entice them as a harlot would. That's the picture. The angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. Where did we hear of that happening before? Well, that image came way back in chapter 12, where it talks about the church or God's people being carried away into the desert region. If you go all the way back to chapter 12, you can see that reference there. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls, held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. Yucky picture. The title was written on her forehead, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. All right, stop there for a minute here. So Babylon is being compared in an image way to a prostitute. And you look at the description and you say, yeah, that kind of describes one, doesn't it? This fine dress, and you've got the purple robe. That was all a part of the dress, usually, of those kinds of women that were on the street, if you want to use it, using that imagery. The gold, the jewelry, the stones and pearls, the alluring aspect here. That's the thing, the seduction aspect. And that is what, in a spiritual way, Babylon did when they were in power originally. That Daniel writes all about that, right? They took over Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. So Babylon did that in that day in 587 BC and carried off captives. Now in John's day, in AD 70, what happened to the temple? Got wiped out, okay? No more temple. And Rome was the culprit then, right? They were the enemy then. So Babylon being compared here to a prostitute, and the description of her adulteries, Rome being like Babylon, is really described in graphic terms. What is that saying? We need to be alert spiritually, because there's going to be ways that Satan is going to use. Remember, the beast from the sea represented anti-Christian government or rule, and the beast from the earth represented anti-Christian what? Religion. Has he still been using those tools all the way through history? Yeah, he sure has. Using them now? Oh yeah. We can see that happening all over the place. So these are the tools he's using to do what? Seduce people. Get their souls. He's trying to capture the souls and keep them from knowing the truth if he can. But we know he's not going to do that, because what? Jesus promised the gates of hell cannot prevail against the onslaught of the gospel. It will penetrate the world. Is it doing that? Yes. Despite trying to keep missionaries out. So we got 10 kings, 7 hills, 10 and 7 symbolic of completeness. Numbers in Revelation are symbolic, meant to be weighed, not meant to be literal, right? Now attempts have been made to, and there's also this parody, and we talked about that a little bit, didn't we? The beast, the beast of the sea, the beast of the earth, the ruler of Satan, who's controlling all of that, is trying to mimic or parody God in the Father, Son, Spirit aspect. And then the fact that he's was slain, remember we read about that, and come back to life, is trying to parody Christ's death and resurrection. He's trying to do these things, again, to draw people to his side. All right? So there again is the picture spiritually of what he's trying to do. The mystery here, there's this mention of on her forehead. That was often the case with literal prostitutes in many of these Asian cities, Asian minor cities, was they'd have some kind of insignia or mark on their forehead to allure or attract people to a certain temple, because many of the temples had prostitutes associated with them, both men and women. And so they would do that to attract them or allure them to these places. What's a part of these spiritual adulteries? Luxury, greed. Babylon in its day with Nebuchadnezzar, remember, they had the great hanging gardens, one of the 7 wonders. The world that's vast. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar walked out one day on his palace and said, wow, look at this great empire I have built. Remember that? And God had told him and warned him through a dream, and Daniel told him, buddy, you're going to be going out there with the animals for a while, dude. You know, he was so arrogant. And then he had the statue built, and he wanted everyone to bow down. So that's the imagery. What has Rome been doing in John's day? Well, they've got temples built to their emperors. Who do they think the emperors are? They're gods or sons of God, okay? They demand worship. Many of them demanded worship. And you bring your incense to the temple and you say, Caesar is Lord. And they want you to go through all of these things. They magnificent temple, each one trying to outdo the other one. And then temples to the gods and goddesses, Zeus and Artemis. The one in Ephesus was one of the 7 wonders. I mean, all of this the enemy is using to capture the hearts and the souls of people. So that's the picture here. Did I have... When we talk about the 7 hills, that's pretty easy to picture that that's talking about Rome, because Rome was built on the 7 hills. But again, a picture of the enemies of God's people. And you get down to verse 18, which we will in a bit. That makes it very clear who we're talking about there. Jeremiah 51. Sharpen the arrows, take up the shields. The Lord has stirred up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, because his purpose concerning Babylon is to destroy it. It's time for their judgment. They were used as judgment on Israel or on Judah and Jerusalem, but now it's time for theirs. Vengeance is for this temple. Set up a standard. Make the watch. Set up watchmen. For the Lord has both planned and done what he spoke concerning Babylon. This is what Jeremiah is saying is going to happen. The Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, surely I will fill you with men as with many locusts. There's the imagery of locusts again, which we've heard before. It's often a picture of armies. And they shall rise as shout of victory. All right? Isaiah 21, behold, here comes riders, horsemen in pairs. Fallen, fallen is Babylon. What did we just read here? Well, we're going to read in chapter 18 those very same words. And all the carved images of her gods, he is shattering them to the ground. In other words, it's time for their judgment to come. Okay? So Isaiah, Jeremiah, again, John is using all these allusions and references to the Old Testament to talk about. She had become, in this image here, drunk with the blood of the saints. All those who were willing to testify to Jesus. All right? What I just read to you from Voice of the Martyrs magazine of what's going on in places like Ethiopia, like North Korea, like China, like India, that's what's happening. He's still trying to get drunk on the blood of the saints. The enemy is busy fighting hard. And he's using these religions as a way to try to bring down and destroy believers and churches and the witness that we have. Now, he's not going to be able to do it, but he's sure trying his best to do it. So the mystery of the 7 heads, the 10 horns, takes us back to Daniel 7. I don't have that one up there, but we've referred to Daniel 7 a lot. So if you want to get that picture, go back again to Daniel 7, and you're going to see the same imagery there. The 10 kings, the 7 heads, the 10 horns, it's all back there in Daniel. The astonished ones are those who the beast has been deceiving. When I saw her, in the verse 6, I was greatly astonished. The angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth dwellers again, whose names have not been written in the book of life, all right, from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come. What's he trying to do there? Showing that he's trying to imitate, he's trying to parody who God is, who Jesus is here, and trying his best to deceive through his means of signs or wonders. It's going to call for wisdom, verse 9. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, one is, the other has not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for a little while. If you try to make that literal, you're going to run into problems. And people have tried to do that. You say, oh, well, let's just go back and look at historically the emperors of Rome and who they fit in and who's following who. And you try to do that, and you get into all kinds of trouble, because the one who followed Nero, the emperor who followed Nero, for example, well, there were 3 of them. And none of them lasted very long. I mean, most of them were less than a year. So you try to figure out numbers-wise and try to fit it in literally into the picture. It just doesn't work. It's a symbolic picture of the way the enemy, Satan, is working through the world. He raises up leaders. He doesn't care to destroy them either, because there's no loyalty in that realm. They don't care who they destroy. So these things are going to continue to happen. That's the imagery here. He belongs to 7 is going to destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings. This is where people really get in trouble and have not yet received the kingdom. They try to identify those literally in a historic way. But for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. 1 hour, limited time. Those things are going to go on. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb. Has he been doing that? Ever since the church started. He's been fighting against the Lamb, hasn't he? Yeah, they'll make war against the Lamb. The Lamb will, though, overcome them, because he is what? Lord of Lords and King of Kings. A phrase used not so much. Now, I ran across where it had been used some in Rome for an emperor. I believe Caesar Augustus had it referred to him. But also the Parthians, who the Romans were deathly afraid of, and who caused all kinds of havoc. Parthian kings will often use that phrase. What's John trying to tell us? Those rulers of the world who want to claim these things, they're not it. No, they're not it. Jesus is the one who is truly King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And with him will be his called, his chosen, his faithful followers. Back to chapter 12. How are we going to overcome the enemy? By what? You remember that?
Standing firm.
Huh?
Standing firm.
Yeah, but specifically in verse 11 of chapter 12 says they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. How this young man I just told you about in Ethiopia, how did he overcome? By the blood of the Lamb and by his testimony. That's what they're doing. That's how you and I overcome. Didn't he say to those churches that he wrote to and spoke to in the early part of the letter, he who overcomes, and he lists the promises, will receive certain things? Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and language. What's God wanting to do ever since things got fouled up there at Babel? And he called Abraham. What was the promise to Abraham? I will bless you, and through you, what's going to happen?
Bless the nations.
All the nations are going to be blessed. In other words, I'm going to bring them back. I'm going to have a plan to recapture them and bring them back. And he did that on the day of Pentecost. That started as they were gathered from all over the place and heard the gospel, and many responded. That's his goal. He wants a family of loyal followers to dwell on the earth with him, as well as a loyal family of spiritual followers. That's what he's wanted all along. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute There's no loyalty among evil here. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. See, Satan's it doesn't matter to him what power he uses. And if he doesn't need them anymore, they're gone. We just said you get rid of one ism and then what? You get another one. Okay? That's his pattern. He's going to continue to use all these things through the world. Religions, governments, rulers. He'll use it all to try to destroy what God has done. For God's put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. God's allowing this to happen. He's been given the opportunity to do this. You can't take it. Okay? You can't take it. He's been given it. The woman you saw is the great city. Great city in Revelation is a reference to Babylon, and more specifically in John's day to Rome, that rules over the kings of the earth. Were they in power then? Yes. But they did come to destruction eventually, didn't they? This image of the prostitute, pretty graphic. How do you see some of that being worked out in our day? What kind of things are taking place that is just drawing the souls of people continually away from God? What are the pictures that come to mind?
Well, the immorality and the recognizing of men and women, in a different way. And the Bible says.
Well, we're being swamped with all kinds of strange, perverted, immoral practices, aren't we? And we're being told that we are supposed to accept those things, right? And if you dare to fight against that, then you've got problems there too, right? Luxuries, greed, problem for us today.
It's like the word slips out of my mind, but the people from like the different companies that come to the senators and stuff and say, well, if you
Lobbyists
Yeah.
and the
Lobbyists.
lobbyists, yeah.
Special interests.
yeah. What are they wanting to do? What's the advertisers want to do?
Want more money.
Want more greed, more
Want
money.
influence.
They don't have to
Tremendous
lobby
influence.
anymore. God.
Because if they believe if they can get the wording right and they can capture your attention through your eyes and your ears, seeing and hearing these things, you're going to be drawn to it, right? You're going to want that. I might not need it, but you feel like you'd like to have it because, well, these other folks have it. I might as well have it too, right? So there's this dilemma that we fight.
Yeah, but the companies have even gone farther. They're not trying to please the people anymore. The ordinary citizen,
Right.
And so, I don't know. I mean, they think that their greed is going to be rewarded through government.
Yeah. Well, you got big companies. One of the big issues right now is freedom of speech, isn't it? What are you allowed to say? Well, according to some companies, like Facebook even, if you don't say what they want you to say or agree with you, you get what? You cut off, shut down. Does that jive with what our Second Amendment says? But they're doing it. So how do you fight that? How do you fight the stuff that's being forced upon our kids now in some of these school districts? Parents are trying. Praise God, they're trying. They're raising up in anger and saying, "Hey, we're not going to allow that." Well, then you got a choice to make. Do you send your kid to that school where it's being taught, or do you pull them out? Do you homeschool them? What do you do? How do you fight these things that are going on right where we're living right now? Luxuries, greed, materialism, the sexual emphasis, the my goodness, the things that are happening. Yeah, well, we could go on about that, couldn't we? So, That's the picture there, and chapter 18 is going to describe the destruction and the fall here as if it's already happened. Now when it comes to Rome, it hasn't happened yet, but will. So I saw another angel, he says in verse 1 of chapter 18, coming down from heaven. He had great authority. Angels are given authority over certain things. We've already seen some of that. Some of them authority over waters, over wind, over fire, over the abyss. And the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." Well, that's what Isaiah said back in his day about literal Babylon. But now, Babylon, we know in John's day is Rome. They're going to come down too, aren't they? All these powers who think they have this great power are going to collapse. She's become a home for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. What's going on here? For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. Well, that's what we just read in chapter 17. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. What's the push? Continual push from the world is profits. Profits. What's the bottom line? How can we make more money? Why do we have to fight drug cartels and mafia people? Why? What's the goal there? Because it's all about the money. Profits. So people can become objects and be sold through human trafficking, which is this most disgusting thing we can think of, and yet it's going on not only in other parts of the world, it's going on right here in the United States. Now they're bringing them across the border boldly with no problem. Just bring them across. Give the coyote more money. Give the drug cartels more money. Bring the drugs in. That's the picture here. This is what we're talking about. A home for demons and everything else. This is what we're dealing with. Where we're living. We've gotten drunk on this picture of spiritual adultery. We've gotten drunk on that. And the push is just how much more can you drain from people's lives? How much more can you increase your profit margin so that you get more and more and more? Who usually gets away with most of the stuff that happens? The ones who are wealthy, right? They can skirt around things, buy their way out. Remember in the book of James, if we can run back there for a second. In James 4, look at what it says here. You adulterous people, this is verse 4 of chapter 4 of James. Don't you know friendship with the world is hatred toward God? And if you choose to be a friend of the world, you become an enemy of God. Submit yourselves then to God and resist the devil. He will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands. Who's he writing this to? You sinners, and purify your hearts, double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Wow. They become drunk on these excessive, immoral, greed-filled practices. And so I heard a voice from heaven say, verse 4, what? Come out of her, my people. Didn't God bring Israel out of Egypt? And what did they want not long after they got out of there? What did they want to do? They wanted to go back. Oh, you brought us out in the desert to die. Now you watered, I made food. Yeah, I know you just destroyed all those false gods of Egypt, and I saw those really amazing plagues you brought on them, but are we like that sometimes? Just saw what you could do, and then we say, what's wrong? It's the heart.
They've been in Egypt too long.
Too long in Egypt, yes, indeed. Too many things they just didn't want to part with. Well, we better think about that. Come out of her. Does he mean literally come out of there? No, because things are pictures here, images. What's the spiritual picture? Come out of that spiritually. Don't be drawn and tied to that way of life. Be separate. That's the word holy. That's what it means. Holy means to be set apart from. To be separate from. That's what he wanted Israel to be. Separate. That's why you hear the word holy so much in the Old Testament. He wanted them to be different from the rest of the nations around them. Be my people. So come out of that. Come out of that. Well, how do you come out of that? Well, you have to commit your whole life to loving and serving Christ. It has to be a commitment of faith, a walk of faith. Now, why would you need to come out? If this is talking about something spiritually and ethically right, what is it? What's it mean? We'll look at the rest of it. So that you won't share in her sins. So that you won't receive any of her plagues. So you won't incur that kind of judgment. For her sins are what? Well, it's like they're piled up to heaven. And God's remembered her crimes and give back to her as she has given. In other words, he will repay. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion from her own cup. Now, we heard that image before. Back in chapter 14, talking about the harvest, the wine mixed, unmixed. Remember we talking about that? Where it was mixed because spices were added to the wine. It intensifies the strength of it. If it's diluted, it means it's been water added, and that often happened. But that picture in 14 was no more dilution. Mix it with fines. In other words, it's going to be intense. That's the same thing he's saying here. Mix her a double portion. In other words, you're going to incur the judgment of God. Give her as much torture and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, I sit as queen. I am not a widow, and I will never mourn. What's that say? Arrogance, pride. Nebuchadnezzar have some of that. These emperors have some of that. Rulers that we know of in the world have some of that. Yeah, Hitler, Stalin's, Mao, you name them. They're out there, been there, some are here. Arrogance, look at that. And what did Isaiah and Ezekiel say of Satan, who was a cherub guardian in the Garden of Eden? What did they say of him? I will ascend into heaven. I will make my throne the Most High. Pride, arrogance. And therefore, in one day, her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, the mighty, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. The kings of the earth are going to be saddened because their wealth is being attacked. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they're going to weep and mourn. Why? Because it's messed up their profits. It's hurt their income. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, woe, woe, great city, O Babylon, city of power, in 1 hour your doom has come. That's as powerful as you thought you were, you're going to come down just like that. Now, did that happen historically with Babylon? Do you remember? Do you remember Daniel interpreting the handwriting on the wall? Remember that? Belshazzar is sitting there in his big banquet hall. He's got all the articles from the temple in Jerusalem there around him and all this stuff. And suddenly there's this writing on the wall. And Daniel interprets that. And that actually, historically, that very night, the Medes and Persians armies under Cyrus came in and destroyed them. 1 hour, you're gone. You thought you had all this power. You thought you were so secure. Everything was great. You got this great army. You had all these great buildings. And boom, it's gone. Just like that. Has that happened before? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Mercy. And there's going to be a list of 28 items here. 4 times 7 again. Completeness. Kind of a complete picture of stuff. Cargoes of what? Gold, silver, stones, pearls, linen, purple, silk, scarlet cloth. Articles of every kind made of ivory, wood, bronze, iron, and marble. Cinnamon and spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, olive oil, flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses, and carriages, and end of verse 13, bodies and souls of men. Taking over human life. Has slavery been an issue all through history? Yeah. Sure has. Human trafficking? Yeah. Abuse of children, abuse of women? All through history. That's the picture here. Satan will use those tools to subvert and discourage and weigh down people's hearts and lives. These are some of the saddest things that you can say when human lives are being bought and sold. And we're no less guilty. The horrible things that we did here in our own country to people of color. And what's really sad about that is that people in churches were condoning that. People were sitting in churches, worshiping God, singing songs, reading scripture, and buying and selling people, justifying to themselves that it was okay. How do we get there? Well, because this is how the enemy works. He gets us worn down and thinking that it's all about us. It's all about what we need and want. Accumulating stuff to ourselves and pleasuring ourselves and all of these things that are going on in the world. They will say the fruit you long for is gone from you. All your riches and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. And the merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment, weep and mourn. What is all this? It's like they just can't stand the fact that it's gone now. O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, glittering with gold, stones, pearls, 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. In other words, it's just gone just like that. Stock market crash 1929, what happened? How did people respond? People were jumping out of windows, they were committing suicide, they thought that their world was gone, right? All because the market crashed. Then we have a bad one happen, was it 2008, when things went down quite a ways? People were all messed up then too. Not as much, but could it happen again? Yeah. Just like that, things can change, can't they? Just like that. Things can change. We have no guarantee of that kind of stuff, do we? Every sea captain, all who travel by ship, the sailors, and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off, and when they see the smoke of her burning, they'll exclaim, was there ever a city like this great city? How could Rome be? You know, if you live in the time of Rome, the power of Rome and their empire, you would think, well, they're just going to be in power forever, right? I mean, who's going to take them down? Right? They'll throw dust on their heads and with weeping and mourning. You see the picture that's here through 17 and 18? It's the destruction of Babylon, the puppet that Satan uses is coming down. Whether it's Babylon or Rome or Germany or China or whoever it is, they're going to collapse. Whoa, great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through your wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin. See the repetition here? How many times have we heard that through the last 2 chapters? Rejoice, O heaven, rejoice saints and apostles and prophets. Why? Because God has judged her for the way she treated you. The cry of the martyrs back in chapter 7 from the saints under the altar. What were they saying? How long, O Lord? How long are we going to have to wait for justice to come? And now he's saying, it's here. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, with such violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. Music of harpists and musicians, flute players, trumpeters, you're never going to hear that again. No workman of any trade will ever be found. The sound of a millstone never be heard. The light of a lamp will never shine. The voice of the bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. You merchants, your merchants were the world's great men. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of the saints and all who have been killed on the earth. Wow. So, the prostitute was given power to rule. The judgment has come. Great graphic picture. It's really in graphic ways. Come out of her was the message. Get your heart out of that kind of thinking. Colossians chapter 3, the very first verse, talks about setting our heart on the things that are above, that are eternal, not on the things that are here, temporal, that are not going to last. That's hard to do. But that was figurative warning here. Kings of the earth are afraid because all their wealth is gone. And a big part of that is connected to human people. Humans who are used, abused, bought, and sold as slaves. It's still going on. And they're condemned for these things. I summarize it up in 4 major areas: materialism, deception, killing the saints, and war. But there is rejoicing to come because God has heard the cry. Okay? So here's some 7 marks I put together here right as we close. We may go back and review this next time, but leaving God out. Anytime a nation sets their heart on leaving God out of the center of their life in any way, foundation life, you're going to suffer ruin. Okay? That's just the way it's going to be. Just go back historically and look at it. Any nation who does that. Sensuality means moral boundaries are being crossed that God set through his creation. What happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? Okay? Think about historically what's happened to areas who do these things. We're fighting a tremendous battle against that one right there. Injustice. We're fighting that too now, aren't we? Where's the justice? Selling of slaves, mentioned in verse 3. Worshipping of products, materialism, the continual love of things. Violence, weapons. Weapons are thought to be what you need to bring security and freedom. Well, what's happening in the streets of many of our cities? Continual shootings. 4-year-old on the news this morning, 4-year-old shot down in Indianapolis. Hundreds of shootings already in major cities. Hundreds. It's like a war zone. Deception, counterfeit, parody. The parody of what Jesus' life and ministry was all about. And then the idolatry. The glorifying of self. Playing God with life. Glorifying self. Lots of items. So those are some of the key marks that Scripture tells us about these powers like Babylon and Rome, who have gotten drunk on the saints' blood, but they are going to come to judgment. Okay? Chapter 19 is coming, and then we're going to get into some interesting material as we approach chapter 20. All right? So we will take it up there.